Hello and welcome. Thanks for popping in. If you're new here, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell if you find this content helpful, and you'll be notified of the next video release. You can also check out my website, consultingninja.tech, where I've compiled loads of free resources available to browse. With all that out of the way, let's get right to it. We are jumping into some more DevOps. And we are looking at DevOps from the perspective of a front-end web developer, a front-end engineer, a React applications developer, however you want to call it. If you're creating websites, you really should be knowing Docker. You should be understanding containers. So what we're doing today is we are taking Docker to containerize a React application powered by Vite. And if you are not familiar with Vite, check out the video popping up in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and you can learn why you should be using it. With that out of the way, I'm going to point out that I'm not going to cover how to install Docker on your Mac. If you need me to cover that, message me from my website or drop a comment below, and I can certainly do a video on how to do that. I will leave a link in the description of this video on where to go to download Docker. So we can see here that I have a very basic application. This is a Vite React skeleton, just using JavaScript, no TypeScript here, and I've just made some minor modifications to add the image and whatnot. So inside of our, first I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to shut off my development server. So you can see that is no longer running. And inside of my app.jsx for this, inside of this lower div, I'm going to add an H. I didn't want an H1. I want an H2. H2, and I'm just going to say container. And that's just so once this is running, you guys can see that this wasn't already some cached version or anything. This is the new one that we're creating in the container. Now, inside of our root directory here, and when I say root, I mean the project, where you have your package.json and your vite.config, not inside of your source directory. So inside of this Docker, this is where I have all of my node modules and the public and source folders. We want to create two files in here. The first is just Dockerfile, no file extension, and mind your syntax. A lot of this stuff gets super specific on how it needs to be. So capital D, Dockerfile, no extension, and you can see that the Visual Studio Code actually changes the icon to be a little Docker icon. So that's pretty cool. Visual Studio is actually also super helpful in, as I start to type commands, I can hover over a lot of these and it will tell me some information about them. Now the first thing that we need to put in here, and all of these initial commands here, like from and copy and expose, we're going to be adding these. These have to be all caps, so make sure that you have them all in caps. And then the actual command. Now what this one is doing, if you hover over it, you can see it sets the base image to use for subsequent instructions. And what this is really doing is this is installing the newest version of Node inside the container. We need to have Node and we need to have NPM. Well, we need to have NPM, and in order to have NPM, you must have Node. NPM, I mean, we're working with front-end applications, so NPM is our bread and butter, right? I mean, we have to have that. So the next command we want to enter is work directory, and you can see Visual Studio is trying to fill that in for me, so thank you, VS Code. And let's just keep this /app. And what this command is doing is creating a new directory and then moving inside of it, and it's called working directory. Now any command you enter after that, you can assume that you are in the /app directory. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to copy our package.json so that we can install all of the modules, and we want to be installing these fresh. So we are going to specifically call out our package.json and also our package lock. And in order to do that in one command, I'm going to type package *.json. So this is saying copy any file that says package and then any characters after it, and then .json. So that is going to grab, in this instance, package-lock.json and package.json. And then we need to tell Docker where inside that container to put them, so let's just put them / right where we're at. After we have that, we want to run npm install. Now this will install all of our modules fresh. After we have that done, we need to bundle all of our source, and this is a pretty standard Docker command, and you just do /. And that just bundles all the source inside the container. After that, we are doing a website here, so we need to have something served. You typically would always have something served. There's very few Docker containers that you would be running that don't have to expose some port. In our instance, we're using Vite. So let's go ahead and just use the Vite standard. So let's type expose, expose, and 5173. That's the standard Vite port. Now, the last thing we need to do is we need to tell Docker what commands we need to run. And in our case, we're just going to npm run dev. And if you look in our package.json, you can see really all that's doing is just running Vite, telling Vite to fire up. Okay? So the next thing that we need to do is go ahead and save that. We need to create one more file inside of this directory that lives right next to Dockerfile, and that is a .docker-ignore. And you can see again that my IDE, Visual Studio Code, changes the icon. It knows what it is. Mind your syntax again here. And what we want to exclude is we want to exclude the node modules because we want to make sure that we're installing them fresh every time. And npm debug.log, just in case we need to debug anything inside of our container. So let's go ahead and save that. Now there is there is a visual application that you can use. There is a UI for Docker, right? It has a GUI. I could show you what that looks like. It looks like this. And you can do a lot of this stuff from inside of here, but we're cool, so we're not going to. We're going to do it from the command line. So inside of our directory, this would be the directory that our package.json lives, and also where our Docker ignore file lives. We're going to need to run some commands. So before we can get going with actually typing our commands, there is one last thing we need to do, and that is in our vite config.js, we need to add just a couple small modifications here. This is not going to get crazy. We just need to come into our define config, add a comma, and then add a server. This is an object, and we need to add a watch. This is an object. We need to say in here use polling true. And then right after the watch, let's do a comma, and we need host, true. We need a strict port, true, and then what port? And we said we were going to use 5173 because that's the default. Let's just leave it like that and go ahead and save that. So with those minor modifications there, we have Vite configured, which, man, this is like pretty straightforward stuff. So back to our command line and what we need to do. So there is a small difference between images and containers. Okay, the first thing that we really need to do is create an image, and to do that we have to do a Docker build. So type Docker build and always add the -t, and what you're saying with that is I want to add a tag to this image. If you don't, Docker will consider your image to be a dangling one, and it's not easy to find. It causes problems. So just add the -t and then name it something. I'm doing consulting ninja /react and hit enter. And I forgot the space dot We have to tell it where we're building this. So you can see it is going through and executing all of the commands that we laid out in our Dockerfile and doing its thing. Wow. So all done and no problems. In order to see what images are here, from the command line we type docker images, and you can see now that I have the image I just created. Here's that name that I used. And to run that image, Docker would need to create a container, and you can just create that by saying docker run, and we want to say what port. So if we wanted to map the port that we exposed from the container to a different port, we could do that here. We don't care to do that, so let's just do 5173:5173, right? We're trying to keep this simple. And then we're going to run it detached, which means it's just going to be kind of running in the background. And then the image that we're using to create that. So hit enter, and you can see that it gave us this long hash, which means it was successful. Now we can do a docker ps and hit enter, and you can see that Docker is saying there's this container running out there. I used this image to create it. This is the command that I ran. This is when it was created. This is how long the container has been running. And these are the ports that are exposed. This name here, this is a name that Docker uses just to help you start, stop, and enter these containers. There are a few commands that you need to know. Let's go take a look here. And so it refreshed, and you can see container is now being displayed, which shows you guys that this is in fact the one that I modified, that I put inside of the Docker container that is now running. So that's pretty sweet. We did it. Congratulations, guys. If you've made it this far, comment below with what you guys think. I'm going to do another Docker video at some point on a whole bunch of different commands. I do want to go point out a couple really quick though. So in order to kill this container, we do a docker stop and then the container name. And what I mean by name is not the name of the image, but this weird name that Docker uses at the end. So you can type in quirky ramen, and this will be different for each time you run this. So yours will not say that. Oh, it's not ramen. It's a AN. And so the container stopped. But if I do a docker ps, docker ps lists only the containers that are running. If you do a docker ps-a, this is all the containers that exist on your local machine. And you can see when the last time it was ran. So if I wanted to run this again, I could run that container by saying docker run and then the name there, and it would fire right back up, and it's actually super fast. One of the awesome reasons why Docker is so cool is how blazingly fast they are once you have them created. So I wanted to show you that, and then if you wanted to delete this container, if there's a problem with it, in order to delete the image, you have to first delete this. So you do a docker rm and then the container name. So quirky ramen. And now if I do a docker ps-a, I have no containers. But I do still have that image. So here's the image that we used to create that container. So if you had any problems along the way, you need to redo something, you will need to, well, it's good practice to delete the container and also delete the image. And to delete the image, you would do a docker remove image, RMI, and then the image name. And this, there's no good way to do this one. You have to type in the actual ID. So I have to type in this little piece of a hash here, E857, and you can see it deleted out that image. So if I type docker images, it's all gone. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you for today. I hope that you found this helpful. If you did, Comment below with what your favorite part was. Like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell, and we'll do something cool again soon. Have a great day.